Hello, my name is Tom, and this is a video about a police chief who just retired. I am still on vacation, and it was not my intention to be recording videos and releasing them almost everything in the next week. And things that came out this morning and the day before were all pre-recorded. But this kind of hit home, and I felt like it deserved talking about. Um, so, when I was a teenager, I was working for Public Works in a small town East Coast beach community during the summers. And, during one of my tasks, another person who worked for a business that was contracted by the town threatened me with a knife. And this detective who took my statement looked out for me. The town investigated, they did all the things they needed to do. This detective, he is the guy who became the police chief in that town years later. In fact, not long after that, a couple of years after that, was when I enlisted in the Coast Guard. I actually traveled across the country. I traveled to Central America, but I finished out my enlistment not too far from that town. And I was a federal officer in the Coast Guard in the area at that time. My last couple of years, I was a, fully certified, recognized, qualified boarding officer. And, sometimes we worked with the local police. That was a time period when another town in the area, the police chief attempted to institute vid mics, microphones for radios that had a built-in camera. And the backlash he got wasn't just from the police in his own department, but from police across the entire state and all neighboring towns. Because sometimes, there's just things you gotta do that the community just won't understand, you know what I'm saying? What that really meant was we kind of have to hide our problems. Anger management problems, alcoholism problems, hey, why did you let this guy go when you stopped him after he went into a ditch while completely drunk behind the wheel? Well, because he had a badge. Those are the things they gotta hide. But now, videos, the cameras, the body cams are standard. It's a lot harder to hide that shit. That's also the time period this detective became chief. I think I already said that. I left that area. I left the law enforcement community behind. I no longer live down there. I had rarely gone back, and I don't think I've actually visited that area at any point in the last 10 years. If I have, it was closer to the 10 than it is to the 0 in that scale of years. And he just ended up going viral because that chief was interfering in a traffic accident and DUI investigation with his own people. And he wouldn't stop interfering, put his hands on the officer in charge of the scene, got body slammed onto the hood of a car, the whole 9 yards. You could hear the officer saying he's drunk again. So, we know what was going on. And, this police chief, if the reporting is correct, is now retired today. So a lot of people really angry that the no disciplinary action was taken. Well, that's true technically, but that early retirement just cost him a huge sum of money every year. What I want to say is, this is not a bad person. He screwed up big. he had problems he wasn't dealing with. You can see the officers doing everything they can to not lock him up, because you don't arrest officers, you don't give them DUIs, you don't do that. Not that the chief was driving the vehicle, but you don't acknowledge that officers have a drinking or drugging problem. You hide that from the public. I think the officer involved in investigating the traffic stop, well, fair is fair. I think there is some anger management and self-control issues going on there. That tends to go with the culture too. Also something they probably don't want the public keying in on and noticing. And this is what happens when in an ableist society we have to give people the benefit of the doubt, and unfortunately that's a terrible idea when those people have the authority to wreck somebody's life, put them in jail, or in extreme cases use deadly force. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. The police chief, as much as there was a family connection and that he was always nice to me and that he looked out for me, did his job admirably when I needed him to, as many wonderful things as he's done for his community, and which he loved, he's supposed to be the example. And he failed in there, and it could no longer be hidden. And because of the ableist culture, when things hit that tipping point, it happens big. And it gets a lot more expensive, because nobody early on is saying, hey, you can't do this. Nobody's standing up to it. Nobody's saying you have to go to treatment. Early in the career, when it's like you're young and nobody's saying, look, you either take medical leave and you go into treatment, or we got to can you. Nobody's doing that. So when it gets up into the higher ranks and it's 20, 30 years later, the problem is now out of control. And this is the sad result that happens to a good man. But it was a good man who had problems that he wasn't dealing with, and nobody else had the will or the strength throughout his career or his lifetime to require him to do better. And unfortunately, that's because the culture here in the law enforcement community in that area hides the problem, hides it very aggressively. It's a complicated issue. I'm sorry that things had to end on such a downward note. I'm glad he was allowed to retire, though, and I'm glad that he will still have his pension, even if it's reduced, that he will still be okay, that he can still have a future, and hopefully his pension, which is still a nice pension if the reporting is accurate, he can still afford to deal with his problems. And for that I'm grateful, because he's a good man. He just needs his problems to be addressed, but he's the only person who can do that. Hopefully this is the kick in the backside that convinces him to do so. Like, share, subscribe, comment. Have a good day.